The Strategy of Information with Nick Inglis, on infogov.net. On today's The Strategy of Information, Nick Inglis talks with Graham Sibley, the CEO of Vancouver-based Collabware. They discuss the future of the profession, running an advanced technology-based software company, and what leadership looks like during a pandemic. All that, and more, coming up on this episode of The Strategy of Information with Nick Inglis, on infogov.net.
Welcome to today's show. I'm Nick Inglis, and this is our inaugural episode of The Strategy of Information. It's a brand new show from a brand new domain, infogov.net. So, what is this show going to be about? It is all about this. Content, data, documents, files, knowledge, records. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's all information. And we're going to be talking about information's every facet, every angle, and every advancement on the strategy of information. We'll talk with CEOs, visionaries, leaders, practitioners, everyone who is trying new things and pushing the information profession forward. Information, it's a form of currency that we barely measure, we rarely track, and we're usually pretty poor at organizing. Those are real challenges that we face in our organizations, but also as a society if we're going to reduce friction and effectively utilize our information. We stand at multiple crossroads today, the forefront of privacy legislation along with massive data breaches. Your information, your personal information, may show up on the dark web if your hospital, municipality, or law firm doesn't pay ransomware, while at the same time we push for new advances in how we structure our systems for managing information. And in these cases, who's truly the owner of your personal information? We have a legal system that's barely keeping pace with our technology advances. We have records managers, still the trusted guardians of our most precious pieces of information, in many cases ignored and unempowered. This is the most challenging time in the information profession and, at the same time, the most dynamic time in the information profession. The differences between the companies that will fall by the wayside and those that will own our collective futures depends on, you guessed it, information. And so we must discuss information, not as a dead asset, but as a living one that both demands and requires a strategic approach. That's what we'll be discussing here on the Strategy of Information. Every facet of information imaginable. The people who are creating and governing our collective futures by strategically harnessing the power of information. That is the Strategy of Information. And who am I to host a show like this? I'm Nick Inglis, and I've spent the past 15 years developing and collecting the best practices in this information profession through my previous work at AIM International, Information Coalition, the Information Governance Conference, and ARMA International. I am a keynote speaker who has spoken at hundreds of events. I am the author of Information, the comprehensive overview of the information profession. I am the director of information governance at iPro. I've been a conference producer and was co-creator of the very first information governance related conference, InfoGovCon, which was acquired by ARMA International and continues on as part of ARMA InfoCon. These days, I'm a highly sought after consultant, author, keynote speaker, advisor, IG evangelist, and as of today, host of the Strategy of Information. On today's inaugural show, we have one of my favorite CEOs in the information profession and frankly, one of my favorite people. Graham Sibley, he is the CEO of Collabware, a leader in the information space. Graham and I, we have an expansive discussion on everything from the original concept and founding of his software company Collabware through to how Graham and Collabware have focused on the care of their employees. Collabware was named one of Canada's best workplaces in 2020 despite this global pandemic. And you're going to hear what's different in how Graham is leading his company into the future. Without further ado, let's get to the conversation with Collabware's CEO, Graham Sibley. Graham, welcome to the Strategy of Information. I am so glad you're here with me. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. Pleasure to be here.
I got to meet you, I don't know, like a decade ago. In the SharePoint community. You had started Collabware, I think earlier that year or maybe the previous year, you were up to like, I don't know, 5 or 6 employees. And you had this software that was like, you know, a couple leaps ahead of everybody else at that point. Like you were a small team with some really great software that was ahead of the curve that everybody wanted. But what I don't know is like what happened before that? What led? So I met you at that point. I didn't know you prior to that. So you'd already arrived by the time I met you. And since that point, it's been growth, just massive growth for Collabware, for you personally, professionally. It's been fun watching, you know, all of this happen in your life and for your amazing company. But what led you to that point? Like, what's your background? How did you get there?
It's an interesting story. I mean, like ultimately, my background is technology. I've been writing code since I was 8 years old. It was just something that just came natural to me, and I fell into it almost accidentally. One could say. Let's just say I made some different choices, you know, educationally, and just kind of came back around to technology and started to build my career in technology, and it led me into the ECM space. And with the ECM space, I really started to look at, you know, I'm a problem solver. I like to solve business problems with technology. That's my thing. So I looked at this and I'm like, okay, I keep doing these projects that are like, you know, these legacy ECM solutions, and they're big and they're taking years. And in the end, what do they achieve? Nothing. So I'm like, this is, you know, disheartening. I believe that it can be done differently. And I had this bit of an epiphany in my last position before Collabware, where I'm like, okay, wait a minute. It's not actually a technology problem, right? These legacy providers, they do great technology. There's nothing wrong with the technology, except it's actually built for the technology. It's not built for the end users and the business and the way it works. So I thought, well, you know what? I can do that. I can build something that will do that. So I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to take the leap. I'm going out and I'm doing it.
Awesome.
And I'm going to do it on the SharePoint platform, because SharePoint at that time didn't have any of these capabilities, yet was trying to compete in that space. And people, you could tell, were moving that way. And I'd been working with SharePoint since its inception back in like 2000, 2001, right? Like I was very intimately
before it was
with the
called
platform.
SharePoint.
Yeah, exactly. I remember my first, like, I went to this, I was asked to go learn this technology, Graham, at this consulting company in Minneapolis I was working at. And they're like, go learn this technology. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll go. You know, why not? You're going to send me somewhere. They're going to give me donuts. I'm all in on this. So, you know, I'll go learn this technology for a day. And it turned out to be the precursor to SharePoint. I'm like, well, clearly the history was written from there. I kind of got attached to it. But yeah, so I mean, the shorter version of the story is saw that opportunity, saw it with SharePoint, decided I'll take the leap. I'll write a piece of software that does it differently, does it for the users, does it on SharePoint, and we'll see, right? Worst case scenario is I'm still consulting, but now I'm doing it for myself. Best case scenario is I get to build a software company to be proud of. So I ended up in the latter.
You have a lot to be, yeah, I was going to say, you have a lot to be proud of. Over the past decade, it has been just, like I said, massive growth. Did you have an inkling that you had it? Like, I'm sure there were other ideas over the years.
Yeah. Oh, I knew I had
something different.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, there were two things. One, I'm going to tell a story. I think it's a fun story. So, you know, when you start in business, you always think about that like domain name, right? Like, and I had this name I wanted really bad. It was like I wanted collaboration, I wanted software, I wanted these things combined. So I thought, you know, got my bottle of wine in the fireplace, and I'm like, Collabware, that would be awesome. You know, but there's no way, right? There's no way that's available. So I go look, and sure enough, it's not. But I realized at that moment when I looked at the Whois record, it was pending deletion. So I'm like,
amazing.
Okay, wait a minute. Am I that, like, is this all connecting for me? All right.
That's
I'm going to put in a bid for this thing. I put in this massive bid because I'm like, I want this name. I ended up getting it for like $18. I was like, okay, this is all coming together. But the real came together was like when we produced the so myself working on the software, and then I had a couple of my friends from my history helping evenings, weekends to round out some of the edges, and we put out the first version in November of 2010. That was the very first like beta version, and immediately 3 municipalities purchased the software. I was like, okay, all right, so I've I've clearly resonated here. So I think we've really got something. And then from there it just started to go.
Yeah. So what was the functionality that early on you provided, and is it the same functionality now? Like, has it been a steady state progression for the software, or has it been, understanding the market and changing as you go?
Fundamentally, the problem is still the same. It's just the technology is so much further ahead now. So when we go back to that moment in time, the very first thing we said is, look, the user shouldn't see anything. It should be transparent, right? They just do their work, they do their thing, and the organization gets the compliance they need. I mean, it sounds easy, but of course it wasn't. But we started with this idea of building out a rules engine that would allow the compliance team to target content based on what they need to look for, not what the user needs to identify. And really go away from this whole manually tag things to see, like if the user is going to participate, because we know they're not going to participate, but some might, the real keeners might. So we really pushed in this direction of what we called simple, seamless, and transparent, right? It's got to be simple for absolutely everyone to use, right? Because we know our audience. Our audience are not the programmers and the IT administrators, right? It's got to be simple, but it's got to seamlessly integrate with the way they currently work. If we introduce change like the legacy systems, we're going to be right back in the same spot. And then the third thing is it has to be transparent, right? The end user shouldn't see, compliance and records management taking place. They should just see that they're able to do their work and they don't even think about it, and it just kind of happens. So that's where we started, was with this concept of a rules engine. And we were the first ones to create this concept. Now, since then, many people, organizations have caught on to that. Yeah, okay, that works. So let's do that. But the technology has advanced further, and we constantly invest in R&D around this. So now we're at a state where we're leveraging, machine learning and AI to actually analyze information in a much more advanced way to be able to what we call enrich the data. So basically, take the data that you have, but use the machine to enrich it further without asking the user to do it. Still simple, seamless, transparent. But now we can leverage that enrichment to actually power the rules, which basically, if you think about it, it's like building an insight, right? We want to mimic the human brain looking at information and basically taking that information and saying, okay, I understand what this is. I understand what it's about. I understand what it's related to. So now I'm going to properly file, categorize, classify, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Except we just don't want humans doing it. We want the machine to do it.
So early on, you've got a people-centered software to solve business challenges. That poses an interesting problem because the people aren't the people that install the software. It's the admin techies that are, people more like us than the end users of the systems. How do you overcome that mismatch? Like how do you go from the person who's on the front end who says, I understand, I want this to be seamless, to get that from that person over to the technology team who would actually take the software and implement it? Like what does that look like? Because those are two different audiences that you have to speak to essentially, right?
Well, definitely. But the principle applies. Simple, seamless, and transparent applies to everyone. So it needs to be equally simple for the administrators. So one of the things, like if we look back at the very first edition, we said, okay, we need this rules engine, right? That's going to do our transparency and automation. But, IT, if they have to go and set up all this stuff and do all this configuration, then again, we're not simple for them. We're going to lose them. So we actually automated all that so that when, for example, a record manager would go in and say, I'm going to create a record category, it would actually go and configure everything in SharePoint for IT. So it didn't actually need to have IT do anything. And that really helped get their traction. I think, honestly, we had a little bit of I guess you could say a loaded hand in that one, in that we had so much experience, early days Collabware, the people I recruited, so much experience with SharePoint that we were able to help IT with other problems that they maybe didn't notice. And that got them very much on our side to help them with this problem. So then they were able to trust the technology that it would go out and do what it needs to do. So, it was a little bit of a strategy in there just to make sure that everyone was getting the same benefits.
But that strategy really goes to the heart of who you are. So people who don't know Graham Sibley, there's a philosophy behind the way that you do business. And frankly, after having several conversations like this, I think you're 100% right that the future of business is along the lines that you have been building. And it's been rewarded. You've been a Vancouver, 50 best companies to work at.
Canada now too.
Canada, across Canada. You're one of the top, you're leading one of the top companies, the best workplaces in Canada, even through 2020, which is, a tough year to have a workplace, even, let alone one of the best in Canada. So in a nutshell, and I know this is as loaded a question as it can be,
Yeah.
what is that underlying philosophy? And
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So one of the things I did early on is I established the core values for the company. Now, people say core values and they talk about like honesty and respect and that sort of stuff. And to me, that's a no-brainer, right? Like I shouldn't need to write those down. If I do, we got bigger problems.
Those are givens.
Yeah. So I really focused on, okay, well, if I'm going to build the company kind of the way I would like to see the company, the kind of place I would want to work at, the kind of place that I would see, value in, not just for the industry, but for the community, then, what are the things that need to happen? And if they don't, I'm going to get upset. So then I codified those as the core values. So we got, think big, right? Everyone who knows me knows I don't do small things. If I'm going to do it, it's got to be big. It's got to be meaningful, or, it's just not worth the energy. So think big is one of the core values. Another one is basically make it happen. It had a different form, but it was a little bit more foul, I guess you could say. So make it happen is the nice form of it, but it is. It's you got a problem, you just find the solution, make it happen, right? That's the way you have to do things, and if you do things that way, it's not just for the customers, it's for the employees too. They got a problem, you find the solution, you make it happen, right? That helps them. We've got embrace and drive change, right? Comes back to that legacy concept. If you're going to deal with an industry that's got this legacy concept of solutions that didn't work and problems that still haven't gone solved, then how do we build a company that really embraces that as part of the core, right? Like change is good. We want change because that's what progresses us, and not just again as customers, but as employees, right? If we embrace change, then people have the opportunity to move like sideways in their career or up and down and all over the place because change is okay. Then we have, grow together, which is the whole thing is, the customers are going to grow, we're going to grow, the employees are going to grow. And if we're not doing that together, if we're not aligned in that, then, that's something that's going to, bother me significantly. And then my last one is a passion for customer success. I have always been known throughout my career as someone who, when I'm working with the customer, whoever it is, no matter what I've done in my career, I'm on their team, right? I'm there to help them be successful. And through that, they are going to get some value. I'm going to get some value. Everyone's happy, right? It's a win-win. So if you don't have that passion for the customer success, then this isn't the right place for you, because it's just, this is what we do. This is our thing. And any one of our customers that you talk to, the very first thing they'll always mention is like, yeah, Collabware's team is like, that's all they do. No matter what the problem is, they're in there, they'll make it happen, they'll figure out the solution, and they're going to do it for us, not for them. And that's, I think, that when you look at it, that's how I do business, and that's how things run.
You said during that answer, you're building the kind of company that you wanted to work at. Mm-hmm. That sounds like you've had experiences working at companies that you weren't the kind of companies that you would want to work at. But those companies have founders too. It seems like, these concepts that you've described, they seem pretty straightforward. And yet,
well, some of the companies I've worked at, they had core values, and I learned some things from those core values. One of the previous companies I was at, they have a very solid, very specific culture. And it's great. It's great for them. It doesn't mean that everyone is necessarily 100% aligned, right? Like I might be an 80% alignment to their culture, whereas I'm 100% alignment to the Collabware culture. People in Collabware may, be the same. Like they're 80, 90% here, but they may go off and form a business one day that is 100% of what they're looking for. So I think you can have that kind of dynamic. And the places I've worked at, I can honestly say I've only had like one or two in my entire career that I would say were not good places to work at.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot from the previous ones that I've worked at, and that helped kind of form an understanding of what is it that I would like to work at. If I could build anything, which I'm in a fortunate position to be able to build whatever I want to build, what would that be? And how would that work? So like some of the things that I did early on, super crazy. I'm going to tell you something, because there are things that form that core that are decisions that people looked at me and went like, are you nuts? Like, what are you thinking? So one of the things, like, let's talk about benefits, right? Now, one of the things that always bothered me when I worked at other places is, if I was younger in my career, and I accelerated quite quickly in my career, so I did well financially, but I was very young. So I noticed things in the larger scale of the business that younger people might not have noticed. But one of those things I noticed is, if I'm single, I don't get the same benefit as someone who is not, right? The company was giving them more benefit. And if they have a family, they're given more benefit. And I thought, that's just not right. Like, I mean, we should all get the same benefit. I'm working just as hard as everyone else just because I don't have kids at that time. Why would I not get the same benefit? So one of the things I did right in the very beginning of Collabware with the benefits package is everyone gets the same benefit. Now, how you use it will differ. So a family may choose to use it entirely for their medical, dental, vision, all that sort of stuff. A single person may say, well, I don't need that much, so I'm going to take the rest and put it in the equivalent of, a 401k. It's an RRSP here in Canada. Yeah. So I get that. I'm not getting it as the actual like benefit because I don't need that much. I'm younger, I'm healthier, I don't have the family, but I still get the benefit. So it's one of those things that people looked at me and said, that's going to cost you a fortune. You're out of your mind. I'm like, yeah, so I am a little bit out of my mind, but
it's paid
what kind
off.
of company do you want to be at, right?
Exactly. And it's paid off with your employees who, I see you at conferences, your employees are always the ones that are out there talking and happy and joyful at trade shows. I mean, we're not doing that right now because of the pandemic, but before the pandemic, I'd see your team lively, happy, always enjoying themselves. And it was a difference. There was a difference there. And it goes back to how you treat your employees. I heard you at the ARMA conference during the CEO's panel talking about with the CEO of Access, the CEO of VaporStream, the three of you conversing with Jason Stearns, the president of ARMA, about how you've managed your team, your company, and your employee relationships through this pandemic. And, if we could shift gears a little bit, I want to get back to the tech conversation. Graham, I'll have you on a whole bunch of times on this podcast. We'll have the tech conversation. We'll have the forward-looking, where the industry is going next conversation. But how you managed and led through the pandemic was different than most organizations. Now, Access, VaporStream, and Collabware were chosen for that panel because you've all done amazing things through this pandemic. Yeah. So you were amongst like-minded peers, but what you've done is actually a lot different than what most companies did. So just want to talk a little bit about how Collabware, how you led through this pandemic.
Well, it's funny, actually. It was after that presentation, and not unrelated. It would just happen to be just after it. I got an email from one of my employees who actually said, I don't know if anyone has told you this, but what you've done during this pandemic has made me safe and my family safe. And that was, wow. Like, I mean, I'm even like choked up a little bit just even mentioning it again. When you're in a position that I'm in and other CEOs in, you have a responsibility, but the responsibility isn't just about, helping people, kind of get through it from an employment standpoint. It's about using the resources you have to help people get through it, period. And I think that, there's decisions that we had to make during that period that, weren't always the ones we want to make, right? Like, closing the office. Nobody wants to close the office down. If you see our office, it's like
your office.
It's like an amusement park. It's amazing.
Yeah,
everyone loves being there. But we have to, and we did it early. We did it well before any of the call outs to do it, because we're like, look, this is real, right? Like, we don't want to take a chance with this. At that time it was like early March. We really still didn't know that much, but it was real enough that it's like, is it worth the chance? No, let's just figure this out. Again, let's make it happen. Let's just close it down. Let's do this. So it's not a choice we want to make, but it's a choice that actually turned out to be, I think, a really good choice. Some of the other things that we had to do is, looking at the mental health side of it, which became apparent, after probably just a couple months even. People aren't ready for this. If you didn't choose to work at home before this, you're now forced to work at home. You're not prepared for it. You maybe have childcare duties that are now a challenge. You have, I know one person in particular had construction they had planned on their house. They certainly did not plan to be there during that, so that has not been pleasurable for them. You've got all of these different choices that people are now forced into. So, one of the things that we tried to do as quickly as we could, it took a little bit to get it all organized, was to institute like let's just call it like a coaching kind of therapy sort of situation, where there would be someone that everyone could reach out to if they just need to talk about anything. We made sure that our benefits program was updated to ensure that all the possible options are available there as well. And then, so we had internal, we had the benefits, and then we actually got a third party external as well to really just help and make sure that, people were able to have someone to talk to about their stresses, have someone to talk to about their career, and just be able to like navigate the waters, because, they're kind of on their own, they're isolated. So all of those things became, I guess you could say, top priorities above everything to do with really the business itself. Right? The business will continue on. I mean, there's challenges with that. Of course, everyone has felt the same impacts around the world. But, you're not going to have a business if you don't take care of the employees, right? So that becomes priority one. And then priority two becomes, now we'll figure out how to navigate the economic impacts of this. But that's actually turned out to be less of a challenge than the people side of the equation, which I think that, we were fortunate that everyone was able to get through in a relatively healthy way. I know individuals who have had, severe depression as a result of this, and they haven't done so well. So I'm fortunate that our people have. But it's something that, everyone out there, I think, no matter who is listening, even like right now, maybe still experiencing those same things. They're not alone, and there's people to talk to. And that's probably, really the best thing you can do at this point, is just to make sure people don't feel alone, even though they may be physically alone.
Yeah, that is a different approach than, I know this is core to who you are. So it probably felt completely natural, to lead with empathy, the statement that, without your employees, you don't have a business. That is not the Gordon Gekko mantra. That is a different type of leadership, and not necessarily the prevalent type of leadership that's out there today. Beyond the, I have a question about the employee feedback, which, you gave us after that last, that ARMA discussion, getting that feedback from your employees. How do you consistently, is that a piece of the consistent performance of the organization tied to that empathetic leadership? Like, is there a one-to-one relationship? Is there, is it, results trail empathy? What does that look like in your mental model of how you lead?
That is a really good question, Nick. I don't know if I've ever really thought about it until now. I would say, it is natural. I'm not, one thing that I know is very well known about me in Collabware and outside is, I am who you see. I'm very transparent, almost to a fault. Actually, not almost, most definitely to a fault. But that's just who I am. And I have no intention of changing that. I wouldn't imagine that I would. I think my mother would be very displeased if I did. So, that is who I am. So I haven't really thought about that as being a relationship. But I would say that, it seems pretty apparent to me, just in general, that if people in an organization have concerns or challenges that are occupying their mental state, then they're clearly not going to be putting their best performance towards what you're asking of them in terms of employment. So it kind of, to me, seems logical that should be your number one priority, is to remove as much of that as possible, at least within the bounds of what you control, so that they are free to do what they need to do. Our purpose statement at Collabware is to free people from information chaos so that they can improve the world around them. Well, the same goes for employees, like free them of the burdens that you may be inadvertently even putting on them just through employment. Free them of as much of that as possible so that they can go on and do their best work, right?
It's incredible. And if there are folks that are listening into this conversation when it airs, I'll be sure to overdub some additional information for folks. If you're feeling these things and you need to reach out to somebody, there are resources that are out there, whether it's, whether your company has the same type of commitment that Graham has and Collabware has for their employees, there are resources that are out there for you. So we'll overdub some contact information for folks that, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, God, that's me. I am at that point. I am that person who is feeling depression and it's getting in my way of my ability to perform. Feel free to reach out. Use those resources that are available to you, whether your company has those resources or it's, resources from a local nonprofit or a group that is out there doing work and helping people get through this pandemic. There are resources out there for you. So don't feel like you're alone. Everybody's going through this. Don't feel any hesitation to reach out. Sorry, that's my little PSA.
No, that's perfect. It's perfect.
We'll put that information up so people can reach out. Graham, you've taken this approach in leading your staff, leading your company. Does that bridge to your partner ecosystem? What's the impact on your partner ecosystem in the values? How does it play in your partner ecosystem, but also how does it play to your clients, the people that are purchasing from Collabware? How do those values translate?
Well, I guess there's the tangible and the intangible. The tangible value impact is that if you do all these things, then your employees are still operating at a very high level of performance, which is great for the customers, right? So, they can reach out. You got technical support questions, whatever they're going to run into. Someone who's like, hey, yeah, let me help you out. No problem. I got no worries because I'm being taken care of. So, let me help you now, right? So I guess you could say a pay it forward sort of situation. And there's been a fair amount of that because our customers haven't been not impacted economically or just, through the same challenges. So, paying it forward is never a bad thing, right? It helps them, which in turn builds that relationship further. And, we get to continue there. On the partner ecosystem side, our partners have gone through their own, different challenges because they're kind of in a different state, right? With customers putting stops on implementations and that sort of thing, that has a bigger impact on them than it does on us from a software perspective. So I think that they've had some challenges that I know I've been helping with a few different ones that I work with, and kind of more of a coaching kind of CEO to CEO sort of thing. Just like, hey, here's some of the things that we're doing that maybe can help you, that sort of thing. But in the end, it's a bit of a different dynamic because, we have direct interaction with our customers. We have direct interaction with the partners, but the partners have their own kind of ecosystem of challenges that they have to deal with. And it's a bit of like, I feel like they're in a much harder position. Consulting companies in general, I think are in a much harder position right now.
Yeah, it's a tough time on them right now. Being a former consultant, you'd go to the client location and you'd spend time working and gathering information. And all of that is significantly more challenging in this COVID world.
Yeah. And it's usually one of the projects like, well, we don't have as much dollars available for that, side project we were going to have you do. A lot of that impact has happened. Thankfully, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and, vaccines are getting distributed, and everyone's kind of got their timetable set now, which is great because it relieves a lot of burden when you actually know there's a timetable to work with. And I'm actually already noticing as a result of this, an uptick in activities. So I think that it's one of those long haul situations that if you can last long enough to get through it, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and things will get better.
And I've been having a lot of these types of conversations. I know Collabware has done well during this pandemic. Not as a negative thing. It's just you have provided a software that people have needed desperately during this pandemic. So of course you've done relatively well through the pandemic. And a lot of other organizations that are in the information space, because of the rapid changeover to work from home, have actually seen benefits and done better during this pandemic than they had previously. But the consultants, system integrators, those folks, it's been a more challenging time. Yeah. You transition beautifully to, there is a timetable, vaccines are getting out there. How do you put those values to play as we start to come back to the office? Do you come back to the office? What does this post-pandemic look like for you as a leader, for Collabware, for your employees? What's the vision at this point? And is it firm, or is it coming together?
Oh, it's firm. I've got ideas, Nick. I got ideas. See these big things that they're happening.
The big thing.
So let's look at it from the people's perspective around the world, right? They're forced into work from home. For some of them, it worked out really well, right? They save money. They're not spending as much time commuting. They're feeling happier about their contribution to global warming and everything else because less cars and blah, blah, blah. They don't want to let go of that, but they do want the office still. So what we're seeing is that there's this hybrid state that is going to develop. Now, we've always had a very flexible policy. People can, we've had people go live somewhere for a few months and work from there. And, I got 2 more that are doing that this year. They're going off to just kind of live, somewhere due to whatever family or just desire, live somewhere, work from that location for a few months. Great. That I'm flexible. We measure by results, not by time cards or anything. The other thing is, when you look at the people who have gone through this isolation, some of them really like that. So they're going to do a hybrid now, and great. Some of them have realized that, the path they were on, they've had a lot of time to reflect, and maybe it's not the path they want to be on. So there's career shifting going on. So we got people moving, sideways in the company that are going from one spot to another spot because they feel like that's what their passion lies a little bit more over there. And that's great too. So these changes are happening. There is an overwhelming desire, just because I think of the culture we have, that the central headquarter office in Vancouver, people do want it back. And it's coming back. People are going to start going in once the vaccines start rolling out. We'll start being back in the office. But as we expand the office, which we'll be doing later this year, if all timing works out, as we do that, the design for the expansion has changed. So I have a crazy idea that I'm going to implement, and I don't want to tell it to anyone yet because I don't know if it's going to work yet. I want to do it first, and then if it doesn't work, I'm not going to say anything. And if it does work, I'm going to be like, look at this, it's amazing.
If it works, we'll have you back on.
There you go. But I got this idea, and I feel like, this is the catalyst that will allow me to do this idea, and people will think I'm a little less crazy than had I have done it before. But what I can say is it's really about going away from the open space concept, which I think in general was the thing that's been going on, but really to a whole new concept that I think is like, again, if I were coming fresh into the workforce, I'm like, what kind of place would I want to work at? This would be it. This would be the setup that I'd be like, yes, please. So that's what I'm going to do.
How often do you ask yourself that question? Because you've brought it up now twice
time.
in this conversation. Is this the kind of place that I want to work at?
I think a lot of people, kind of, I would assume, I'm assuming a lot of people kind of self-check their path in life, and are they doing the things that they would like to be doing? Are they making the choices they would like to make? Are they making things more difficult? Are they making choices that they will regret? I mean, these are the things I question all the time. And am I doing something that I would look at and say, yeah, that would be exciting? Or am I doing something, that, for some reason, maybe for process or something needs to be done? I'm like, no, I don't like those. Yeah. I like doing things that actually have I guess you could say a bit of a feel on it being a choice that will improve my life or other, employees' lives, or something that will be better, rather than just, doing. So
I just found it really interesting. You said that it was a value, and as you're explaining what comes next, the values are coming out of you. Like, you're saying these values just innately because they're real values.
Well, like I said, the exercise that I went through, that I encourage anyone to go through, regardless of whether they're running a company, if you want to kind of establish your core values, your 3 to 5 things that are your rocks, just sit down and write a list of all the things that would piss you off if they happen, right? If you can really be honest with yourself and say, these are the things that I'm like, that gets me going, well, then that tells you what one of your core values are, right? Like that's the center of you right there, that if it happens, it's gonna upset you. So the opposite of that is your core, right? Yeah. So that's the exercise. So they have to come. Like if they don't come through, then it's all BS, right?
Well, I think for most organizations, it is mostly an exercise in BS.
I agree. I think most of them do with the trust and honesty and integrity. It's like, okay, honestly, if you don't have those, like inherently, do you really need to write that down? Like, you might need to think about yourself if you have to write down that trust is important. Really?
Yeah. Shouldn't that just be how you operate?
One would think so, yes.
Well, Graham, this has been absolutely fantastic. I am so appreciative of your voice in this space as someone who is changing the future of the workplace, in addition to solving information challenges for your clients. It is an honor to have you on. I assume that for the next 20-something years, you will continue to be one of the best workplaces in Canada, because I don't see how those values don't lead to that innately. And I don't think you can turn them off. So
no, I don't think I can. Maybe if one day we do so well that I somehow am no longer the best fit for running the company, then maybe it changes at that point. But
Well, Graham, thank you again for being a part of the Strategy of Information today. It's Graham Sibley, CEO of Collabware. You can check out their solutions, their products, and their services at collabware.com. It's an absolute honor to have you on, and I can't wait to have you back.
It was a pleasure, and thanks for setting all this up.
Such an incredible leader in the information space that Graham Sibley is. And just like that, our first show is nearly over. Thank you to Graham Sibley. Also, thank you to you. This show is listener supported. To find out more about how you can support the program, head to infogov.net. Before you click out of your podcast player, be sure to click subscribe if you haven't already, so that you won't miss a single episode of the Strategy of Information. In the next episode, I'll be talking with the person who has arguably had the largest impact on the world of privacy. Her work it's enshrined within the EU's GDPR, and she is the creator of the widely acknowledged privacy by design methodology. Of course, I'm talking about the great Anne Cavoukian. She's incredible, and our conversation in the next episode of the Strategy of Information is both insightful and expansive. Stay tuned for that. I'm Nick Inglis. Thanks for tuning in, and I wish you the absolute best in all of your information endeavors.
The Strategy of Information is listener and sponsor supported programming. Subscribing to the podcast is free, but supporters gain access to every episode in HD video, bonus episodes, the occasional extended interview, merch like tote bags and stickers, and so much more. Head to infogov.net to learn more about supporting the program. Corporate sponsorship options are now available for Season 2 of The Strategy of Information. The Strategy of Information with Nick Inglis is available on podcast platforms everywhere and online at infogov.net. This has been a production of infogov.net.